Well, here's my gear for today's shave, and in retrospect, maybe I should have picked a label here that was kind of beige and pale, right? Then everything would have matched. Um, Treet Platinums are a really cheap blade, and there are a few razors that these guys really shine inside. And so, if you ever find a deal on these guys, or maybe buy some from Try a Blade, or some type of sampler thing, because then you find a place where they have 100 of them for $6 or something like that. And if you happen to have a razor and it works well for your face, then it's a great deal. So we'll try it today with the Pearl Flexi, the Generation 7 that I've been so impressed with for the first uses that I've had of it so far. We are going to use my Taj handled Semogue Owners Club. It's got about a little over 60 uses on it. This is what I actually meant to use during austere August. I ended up using my Omega Jade from Connaught instead because I was moving and I lost track of this guy. Because this is the one that I decided, hey, I am going to put a bunch of uses on. And because I want to get this boar, I want to get a boar to a really high number of uses to where you get all those split tips and I can have that image for the future of what boars can become, because so many of mine are young, around 25 uses, 30, 40 uses, that sort of thing. So this is the brush I picked to put a lot of uses on. We're going to be using Mitchell's wool fat. Again, I've used that a little while back, but you know what we're going to do? We're going to use the Marco method today, or at least something resembling a Marco method. If you guys have never used that one, then this will kind of give you a bit of a hint about it. You can search on Badger and Blade, the forum site there, and look for the Marco method, and it's a guy named Marco that did it, and he thinks that the Marco method is actually a misnomer, and it's really called the Old Italian Masters method or something like that, and that's where he got it. And he said it's best with a boar brush or a high backbone badger brush with soft tips. He says that he likes to use it to lather his Italian soft soaps. Well, in my list of soaps that I'm going to bring to you guys, while my nose is kind of out of sorts, is Perazzo Red, and this is the super formula. I just used it one time. It didn't impress me any more than the normal Perazzo. And so I've only got one use on it. But I thought, hey, well, actually, this is one that I like the scent of, this sandalwood scent. And I think I'm smelling it about this sandalwood note right here, remembering how intense it was a while back. I'm thinking I'm smelling it maybe about 50% right now, this type of note. Other notes, I think I'm smelling more about it at 60% with my COVID nose. Now, does that Perazzo represent that soft Italian soap that Marco was talking about? Well, yeah, it is an Italian soap, but Perazzo is kind of that one, that cheap soap that's just a couple of euros over in Europe, and it's available everywhere, right? And so maybe it's talking about better Italian soft soaps, and so that's why I'm not using the Perazzo today. Marco also said that it was useful for hard soaps, and Mitchell's wool fat definitely qualifies for that. And he said the general idea here is lots of water, lots of soap equals lots of lather, kind of thing. Now, some people say you can do the Marco method and not use up a lot of soap, but in the original Marco kind of instructions, he did mention lots of, working time, using lots of product to get lots of lather. So we're going to do that today, and here is my Mitchell's wool fat puck that's pressed in. You can see it's been splashed in just a little bit, and I am going to be using the bowl as a part of today, and so that's why I said it was a modified Marco. What we're going to do is load up kind of Marco style and see, and then finish up in the bowl and see where that puts our lather. Okay. So this brush that I'm going to be using is a Semogue, and some of those Semogue brushes take a long time for the tips, a lot of the tips to split. And this guy, I don't know, 5% of the tips have split, and he's got over 60 uses on him, probably closer to 70. And so that is what we're dealing with here. But the good news about Semogues, unlike Omegas in my experience, is that, yeah, maybe it's taken a while for the tips to split. However, in about 10 uses or so, this brush was comfortable to use and it wasn't killing lathers anymore. And so then I'm able to use it comfortably and then gradually wait until more and more tips split. And that's kind of what I've experienced with most of the Semogues that I have, and probably most of the Zeniths too. This one has as you can probably see, kind of a natural splay here as the strands come out of the knot right there. They're kind of glued in place at an angle, and that helps you to have some of that easy splay right away. Now, let's work on our Marco technique here. But before we do, I need to put the blade in the razor. I think this guy may only have one use, very few uses on this Treet Platinum. Man, Treet is a brand, and there are a bunch of variations. Like I think there's a Treet Carbon, Treet Platinum, Treet Stainless, a whole bunch of different options. You don't see a lot of these in the kind of the American repertoire of like Reddit and things like that. These may be available elsewhere, or more popular elsewhere is what I mean to say. Now, yesterday I used a setting of 3, and I did go against the grain right here, and I almost never can do that, right? But that did cause me a hint of irritation, but it was gone in like 2 minutes. Okay, so why don't we try a 4 and just see what happens. Before I tighten this down, I like to loosen up my adjustables and change the setting when it's loose. You may not have to do that in some cases, but that's just what I do. All right, tighten that guy down. His predecessors had kind of alignment and gapping problems in some cases. I think many of them actually, if you used it at 3 or less, you wouldn't really notice some of these problems. And that's kind of where my sweet spot is anyway. We're going to try a 4 today just to see how, because I'm all sciencey and stuff. And we'll see, does it still feel very smooth like the 3 does? The 3 is really efficient though. So am I probably going to get more efficiency? But is it still going to feel smooth? Those are some questions we hope to ask and answer. Let me get my face wet. And here's the big thing about bore brushes. If you don't know this about them, you can fall victim to the myth that bore brushes eat lather. Now, you know what? Bore bristles, they absorb water. They are little, long, firm sponges, and they just absorb water. That's why they are like a broom. They're like a crisp, hard broom when they're dry. And now look, they're floppy and movable when they're wet. They absorb water. And so if you don't soak them for long enough prior to the shave, then that lather you're mixing up right before the shave, that's starting to get soaked into the bristles. So that's what's going on. It's your problem, not the brush's problem. Give it. I like to give my bores minimum of 3 or 4 minutes, but I usually try to give them 15 just to get a good soak. Now with Marco, one of the instructions is to pull it out of the water and then let gravity take away any water that it will do. Sometimes if you tilt it at an angle, you'll get some more droplets like that, but we're not going to do any shaking, anything like that. So we take our soap. Marco, he says he likes to, on hard soaps, dribble some water on there, but I mean, to me, really, you've got a brush loaded full of water. Do you really need to do that? I don't think you do. I'm going to skip that part. All right, so we take this loaded brush, and then I'm going to put it on the soap. I'm going to angle you down so you maybe have a better look at this. And then what we're going to do, now he says maybe 45 seconds to 60 seconds. He says maybe 120 swirls, something like that. But he said it really just depends on your brush and that sort of thing. Now I was reading, I'm going to start it at 10:30, and we'll just see what it ends up to be. I was reading online that one of the things is that you do it until the wet, bubbly stuff goes away and is replaced by a more firm, a more creamy slurry. And so let's use that criteria. Now you'll notice also I'm not splaying the brush very much. That's part of Marco's method. You just use the tips. You don't splay the brush very much at all. Very light pressure on the soap. And because of that, you are going to end up going for a while. Whereas with my usual method of kind of a medium pressure, or slightly lighter than medium, and here we come on about 1 minute of loading here. With my method, I'm just loading for maybe 20 seconds or something like that. So, but of course that's with more pressure. So you're not, with less pressure, you're not going to pick up as much soap. And so we are giving the water in the brush here time to kind of soak down in to the surface of the soap here. We're also letting a little bit of the wetness down from the brush, not intentionally, but that's just kind of what's going to happen. And then as we keep stirring up more soap from the into the kind of slurry from the solid puck, then that's going to combine with that water. And so yeah, oh yeah, see now we got some of the bubbles popping up. But we keep going until maybe it looks more like a slurry and we don't see as many bubbles. Let's try that theory of Marco. Some people, the way they do Marco is quite messy because they have a lot of overflowing lather. You know, people do it in different ways, different variations. Marco himself did not actually mention how the soap should look, or this kind of slurry concept that I'm introducing. That's one that somebody else talked about as a part of the Marco method, but officially it's not really part of how he initially wrote it up. We are starting to get a little bit more creamy here. I have to do small circles because if I do big ones, it kind of just pushes everything over the end. I am, as you can see, I'm kind of overflowing a little bit. I don't want to overflow into my basin here because I want that to be my clean rinse water. So I'm going to move things aside a little bit. I should have probably paused you. Okay, there we go. Okay. Now, will the lather, you can see some of the airy stuff has flowed over. You know, will the lather, oh yeah, okay. Will it get kind of creamy and slurry? I don't know, I wonder. Now to me, I'll bet this thing is really overloaded. Why don't we find that out? And so let's depart now from the Marco method. I'm going to take some of this good stuff, do a little bit of a face wash. I was reminded about the Marco method and some of the other methods as I was addressing some questions And I posted a separate video recently about, answering those questions, addressing some of the common misconceptions that some people have about my method, and also just talking about the truths about it, and also the weaknesses. If you've got well, I don't guess I really talked about the weaknesses too much. Sometimes people might get, and look, there's plenty of soap on my fingers here. And so that tells me that we've probably got a very saturated brush. Yeah, we've kind of made a mess. I wish I had a sink to, this is the time where I wish I had a sink to clean this up very quickly. It would be a cinch if I did. All right. So now, if you were a Marco Method face latherer, and that is what it was originally designed for, you would take this and start working on your face. You would add, and then from here it's basically normal face lather work. You would take this to your face and then add water as needed, and that's all there is to it. And Marco recommended this method to people who were new, maybe having trouble with their lather, or had Italian soft soaps that they were having trouble figuring out how to lather. But man, I never really had a problem with any of those. But apparently some people had, and people were asking him questions, so he posted this method. So what I'm curious to see then is how much soap have I picked up? So let's work this in the bowl and see what happens. I forgot to look at the time, guys, but surely it was a few minutes of loading. So light loading like that, how much soap is that going to give us? Curious about that, and that's why I've gone to the bowl, because if I was going to the face, then a lot of that concentrate in the beginning would just go down the drain anyway. But if I'm using a bowl here, we'll be able to see how much lather is generated from that kind of version of the Marco method. My jigger here has 40 milliliters of water in it, and I use just kind of subtraction at the end of the shave to find out how much I used. And with that soaking brush, how much water are we going to need to add? Let's say we add 3 teaspoons of water. Well, I sure would hate to have to add 3 teaspoons of water drip by drip. That would just, man, that would be so tedious. Another reason why I don't like face lathering. Now, the reasons I don't like face lathering might differ from your goals in face lathering, and so just because I don't like face doesn't mean it's wrong for you, right? Now still we have plenty of soap here, and you look at the texture, look how firm it is, and one of the most important things, look at the twists and turns, look at the detail in the folds and the hills and valleys. As we keep adding water, you'll see that soften and get more kind of creamy and get less well defined as we hydrate this lather more. It looks like what we're going to discover is that we've got just tons of soap in the brush here. Probably going to make a big old bowl full of lather. Now, one good thing about the Marco method, a good concept, is if you're new and having trouble, then why not pick an excess of loading, because then at least you know you're going to have enough product to do the job. And if you end up with a big bowl of lather, then that's okay. Or if you end up with a pasty lather on your face, that's okay, because then you can just keep adding water, and now at least you know you've got plenty of lather to do the job. And that's true. Sometimes as you're learning, going to the extreme ends of the spectrum is a great way just to make sure you're on the right track. Sometimes you go extreme and you realize, wait a minute, it turns out that really wasn't all that extreme. However, there are a couple of drawbacks to that. If you come into a bowl lather with too much soap, like twice as much as you need, then that means you're going to have to put in twice as much water as you need. It's going to take more time to develop that lather. That can be inconvenient. But, you know, the idea is, if you're new, that if you end up with, loading for 2 minutes and then looking at your bowl of lather going, wow, that's just twice as much as I need, then I guess you know that now you can start dialing back your load time. There is a disadvantage to going to face lathering with a concentrate on the brush that is just more soap than you need, and that is that you are putting something on your face that has less water. It's less diluted, and so therefore if there are fragrance oils or things that might cause irritation or dryness to your face, they're going to be exacerbated with a drier lather. Now, do you see the textures change now? It's getting softer. There are still hills and valleys, of course, but they're less well defined. They are larger instead of small with smaller details. And that's just going to keep happening as we keep adding water. And then by watching those hills and valleys and details, you can learn and get a feel for, each soap base is going to be different for you most likely, but you can get an idea for where you like to have your lather. It could be some of these views of the lather that I've shown you already might be your stopping point. It's not quite mine, but it might be yours. You might like yours drier than mine. I can feel the weight of the water in this as I'm moving it around. I can feel its resistance to me. Now, where are those hills and valleys now? So visually, there's definitely some cues that you can use to monitor your lather's water content. Even if I kind of stir it up by poking like this, you do start to see some hills and valleys, but those smaller details are gone. The sharper ridges, things like that, they're just not there. So you can use those visual cues to kind of know. And yeah, it looks like that particular load of Marco has given us too much soap by quite a bit. So if we're talking soap efficiency, then maybe we could reduce our load time, that sort of thing. Maybe going for that thicker slurry isn't quite the way to go. Maybe counting to 100 swirls or something like that might be a better way. You know, so these are things you can play around with as you work on your lathers. But if you're a face latherer, you may never know this is how much lather you could have generated, because that thick concentrate in the beginning, it would have been washed down the drain, and then you would have been left with whatever's left in your brush to try to make a lather out of. And that's why I switched to putting it in a bowl here instead of being pretty focused on sticking with the Marco in a dogmatic kind of way. I do feel like adding just a little bit more water here. And then I think we'll go with it. With my videos, feel free to fast forward, and what I mean is there is a settings button, a settings gear on the YouTube video, and if we're making a lather and you don't have the time to devote to watching the whole thing, you can change the playback speed. Hit that gear, change the playback speed to 1.25, you'll still be able to understand my words, but it'll save you some time. 1.5, if I speak at a normal pace, you'll probably still be able to understand my words at that speed. If there's ever a time when I start to speak a little quickly, then the 1.5 might get a little busy. But that's, of course, going to speed you through the shaves quicker. So there, now look at that texture. We'll plunge it around just to kind of mix it up and make it a little bit more turbulent so you can see how that looks. See, that's so different than what you saw before. And I just don't think that this lather is overhydrated. Let's show you some of the awesomeness there. Look, he's still got some firmness the way he's holding himself up like that. Let's just see what that turns into once we get it on the face. It could be that Mitchell's oil fat needs to be a little bit on the thicker side. I don't think so, but let's just play around with it and see. And then we get to work with that pearl that has been the Flexi. Whew, it's been doing great. Normal growth today of about a day, I think. And I've got some dripping in my goatee, but honestly, I bet this lather probably needs a little bit more water, so I'm just going to leave it. Got that light linen type laundry, clean, soapy scent on this soap. Yeah, looks like it could use a little bit more water, but let's just keep kind of working it in and see how everything transpires. If it's just a little bit too dry, then you can put a little bit extra water on your face, leave a little bit of extra water from your rinses, and that can take care of things nicely. Had some excess that I knew was just going to fling off if I didn't rake it into my lather bowl. You ever try to go the other way? It's so weird. I always go this rotation right here. So weird. Now it's a little easier on the other side, but it still feels quite strange. Get rid of more of these clods here. And this does feel very kind of thick and creamy. Let's tweak it a little bit with some, I think I love the jigger method of adding the water when you're building the lather, but when you need to add water to the brush during the shave is kind of its weakness. And so I'm going to try the drip method that is so often used by face latherers. As you can see, it's not really making too much difference to my lather here, because this stuff is concentrated. It needs more water than just a few drips at a time. At least for my standards. You may think it's perfect, and that's okay. So what you can do is paint and take a look at it there. Look at the lines here as the excess has happened, and if it looks like layers and they're firmly defined, then that tells you a little bit about your texture. That tells me with this soap I probably would like to add a little bit more water. So let's try the other method of just kind of dipping the tips in the water. Now, the dribbling and dipping the tips is adding water to the lather that's not coming away from the jigger, and so that means kind of my math is a little messed up, but I'm going to dip again here. But with the loading being Marco style, based on the appearance of the lather, I kind of am not trying to make a reproducible experience this time in terms of water measurements and things like that. There we go. Oh yeah, this is feeling wet and slick. Still pretty creamy feeling on the face, but this is starting to feel like a better, creamier lather. And it's still kind of translucent on this side, but it's laying down that nice slim layer right next to the skin that's going to be the winner and do the job. But we've definitely spent plenty of time working the lather into my face today, so skin should be pretty conditioned. I saw a video recently where the guy had a lather that even he admitted was too dry, and then he added some water to his brush with the sprinkle method, and he worked it a little bit, you know, and then was pulling it away from his face, and you were seeing the hydration, you know, how it really changed his lather, but he didn't remix it on his face, and so the layers that were closest to his skin, they were still that dry stuff. And just think about that. I mean, you do what you want to do, right? But if you are making your lather wetter, then just kind of rework everything. Don't just don't lay the thick stuff on the bottom and then just play with the stuff on top, because that stuff, the razor is just going to kind of rake it away anyway. It's not even going to help your shave in any effective way. It's just going to be pushed aside. All right, feels great. And even with that, I don't think I ended up taking too much lather away, because what I took away was concentrate, and I kept adding more water, you know. So yeah, this is a usage of a lot of soap with this particular instance. Now, soap is fairly cheap, and so I mean, sometimes there's something about swimming in money, right? Taking a bunch of coins and jumping in there like Scrooge McDuck in the old cartoon, and taking a swim in your money and excess and things like that. And so if an area of your life needs to be a little wasteful, a little bit of excess, and you derive pleasure from this creamy stuff being on your face and too much lather being in the bowl, if that makes you happy, then why not? Do it if you want. All right. So setting 4, so we'll try that this time with the Treet Platinum and see how that blade does in this. It's growing to become a favorite razor, I think. And again, just a little bit of blade feel, but the 3 was noticeably smoother, but this is not irritating at all. The blade is doing a good job. There's a small amount of tugging. You know, you're not gonna, I think most people would not say that it's cutting through like a hot knife through butter. I think it would need to be a little smoother to make that claim. But it is almost effortless, and it's moving cleanly, definitely not irritating or anything like that. And that nice slick lather, this razor is moving through that easily. Nice. Very nice. And then we have a kind of a buttery kind of feel after that. It's and you know, sometimes that buttery type feel is not a fast type of slickness, and so you would want to relather, but you can tell it's taking care of your skin, kind of nourishing your skin with what it has here in the formula. And that also speaks to the fact that we kind of put concentrate on our skin instead of something that was already hydrated properly. Now we'll definitely, in light of the lather here, be leaving some of the moisture on my skin, but as you saw, I was taking away so much of the lather here that I wanted to put in a little bit of water here. And boy, I'm probably used up 35 milliliters of water. I'm almost down to the bottom of that 40 milliliters capacity. All right. And this is splaying very easily. I might want to try this method sometime with a nice badger brush that has high backbone. I'm curious what he means by that it works well with a high backbone, you know, and I guess as opposed to the softer knots, you know. That's an interesting point. So we're going to excess here by just loading a bunch of soap. There's one guy that has a video on, and he calls it like the ultimate latherer, and sure, he makes just piles of this really dense lather, but you know what, it's too dry. Look at the globs, they stand up on their own, and they're like the size of golf balls, and sure, they look great, but I guarantee you, if you were to take that hydration level and double it by adding more water, it would be a slicker experience on your face. I guarantee you. So that's kind of lather porn. That's picture lather, not really shaver's lather or performance lather, at least in my book. All right, second pass now. Well, this seems to be a pretty nice blade and razor combo. Maybe not as nice. Well, you know, I can't compare it directly because this is a more aggressive setting. So I'll bet this blade would be just fine if I used it like the others at the setting of 3. But even right now, it's moving comfortably. Very little blade feel. Feel the edge a lot. The razor is moving across my skin smoothly, nice hydration. I haven't really seen too much difference that makes me think that slickness and protection aren't the same thing. If you have a lather that's slick, then it will be protective, is my current belief. All right, now a little wetter than that first one, because instead of that, you know, that buttery feel, it's still there, but it's a little wetter because that lather I used was a little nicer, a little more slick, and all it takes is grabbing a little scrap of that lather and kind of move it on your face, and I could shave with just that again. All it takes is a little bit here. Not going to add any more water. I think it's, since my face is still kind of wet, I think we're still good. Let's take a look at the consistency now. And I've got 5 more passes in this bowl here. Now there, oh, now it takes a good bit of quantity to actually do that effect right there, and so I don't know if that necessarily should be something you look for, because that also means you maybe generated too much lather, but that kind of flowiness seems to be right where I like my Mitchell's wool fat. Oh, and this just feels tremendous. Feels slick and nourishing. Makes the brush feel soft. That's great. So, I believe this is pretty much the Mitchell's Oil Fat Lather I'm able to achieve, but my method's actually a lot quicker because I'm not overloading the soap. I didn't have to take so long to keep adding water to it. So this slurry method with the wet brush and light pressure, for me in the bowl, it seems to be a waste of time and a waste of product, but soap's cheap, so mainly waste of time. You can see the video right now is probably 20 minutes further than it really would have been if I would have done my normal means. So, what does that mean tomorrow? Should we try as a face lather tomorrow? Now, right now, boy, I can feel that the hair, the stubble has just been cut nicely. because there's just not much left to pick up. I can change my angle to try to find any little bits that are left over, but man, the 4 seems to be very nice. It's not a huge departure from the 3 setting. It's a little bit. And so I'll bet there's going to be a lot of this razor that I'll be able to use depending on how I feel at the moment. And also the 3 setting that I used the first time I tried it, it was cutting down 2.5 days of growth without a problem. So you know what I might try tomorrow? Like the 2 setting. Just see how smooth that is. Man, I bet that's going to be smooth. All right. Again, we have that nourishing feel. Just remains consistent after each pass is done. So I am happy. Okay, there's a little bit right there, so we can reach in. A little touch up I need to do right there. Yep. It's where the grain just travels in a weird way. And there we go. Looks great, nice and close, feels tremendous, no irritation at all. There we go. Thank you, Mitchell's. Thank you, Semogue boar brush. Comfy, awesome. I was just checking the closeness on even my trouble spot right here, and this razor seems to really nail it. Just barely even see any tips. Everything's cut flush, and that's very odd for me. You'll notice I did not do any kind of against the grain stroke right here. And even so, it ended up with a great close shave. Comfort and closeness both seem to be walking hand in hand with this Pearl Flexi version 7. I continue to see no improvements that they need to make on this guy. It's just, he's heavy, but that's really about it. And that's not even a complaint for me. I mean, yeah, I might like him to be a little lighter, but he's fine. And that also contributes to the feeling of smoothness because there's more mass in the razor to when it encounters something, for that inertia to keep it moving through the hairs, so that it helps you. Kind of like timeless stainless razors are kind of heavy, and so they that gives them a little more sense of smoothness than like an aluminum of the same configuration. All right, well, tremendous. If I were not to finish this thing off with a more hydrated version of the lather, I could see maybe feeling a little bit itchy because the more concentrated lather. But as it is, it worked out nicely. So there we go. Mitchell's wool fat. It just worked out great. At least in terms of the final lather. It took a while to get there, so I'll know in the future. But what if next time I do the same thing, same brush, maybe I don't load for quite as long, but then switch to the face right away. Yeah, sure enough, that concentrate's going to go. I mean, and just think, if I were to switch the face right away, I ended up adding probably 25 milliliters of water even before I put it on my face for the first time. And so is that what I'm going to have to do when it's on my face? You know, so I definitely don't think in the future I need to load until it looks like a slurry, until it looks, I think loading until that stuff is still airy and bubbly might be right. And so maybe the 120 count, you know, maybe that's a better guess, or a minute, something like that, because maybe a minute of loading with very light pressure on just the tips, maybe that's kind of equivalent to my 30 seconds with a little bit more pressure. See, that seems to be more of a fair shake there. So maybe we'll try that out next time and do an actual face lather. We'll see how I feel. But with this scent, pretty much anything will work, will feel good on my face. let us do that with, what's back here? Stirling Gentleman. That sounds good. Why don't we try that guy out? I do feel like using, oh, it's a little, my face is dried out a little bit because, you know, I did dry it out. So it might take a second to smooth this guy out. I do like Stirling Gentleman. So, as you can see, this might not be the kind of lather that I like to do on a regular basis. And I kind of thought it would end up that way, but that's why you try things, right? Because sometimes when you try something new, maybe you don't land where you wanted, but sometimes in that process you learn something. All right. The end result actually was I used up 36 milliliters of water. How about that? And that was for enough lather to do 3 whole shaves or more. I still have a bowl full of lather after 3 passes. So, and this right here, this is good stuff. I almost want to freeze this, you know. This is properly hydrated to my own standards. Yours may be different, but to my standards, this is the money, the golden money right here. Golden money, precious stones, all those good words. That's what this is. Okay, oh yeah, that gentleman is kind of starting to soak in a little bit. I'm able to smell it more. It sure is nice to be able to smell again, at least to some degree. Man, it was so weird taking soap pucks that I had smelled just a few days before and have them give me nothing. That was so strange. All right, very nice. So after cleaning up the brush, this is what my guy is looking like after today's shave. You can look in the description and see exactly how many shaves, how many uses this guy's been through. I think, like I said, almost 70. And obviously we've got plenty of splay here, and eventually more of these border bristles here are going to join their friends around here. I've seen other pictures of people's Semogue Owners Club brushes and that's what it's known for, the big bloom, right? But since so many of the tips haven't split fully, you're getting more tip feel. You're not getting quite the softness that you will someday. And so boars are a funny thing. You can try one for 20 shaves and then ditch it because you don't like it, but in reality, that's not the brush it's going to be. And I realize that some people don't want to spend time, like I don't want to spend time and invest that kind of time in an Omega that's going to give me kind of rough shaves until I get 200 uses in it. I don't have that kind of life, especially when there are Zeniths and Semogues out there. Now maybe I might take an Omega and take it into the shower with me or something, and every day give it a good wet workout with a bar soap, and then just kind of scrub myself a little bit with it and let it do the wet dry cycles, and then hopefully it will, without me having to feel that roughness on my face, maybe we can get those tips to split in a more aggressive manner. Of course, those Omegas also inspire maybe those accelerated tip splitting techniques like soaking in hair dryers and various things like that. But as for me and this guy, I'm just using him, you know, and then after the shave, I strap him up and down on the towel, kind of Karate Kid style. And then just to make sure we get some nice airflow, then I open him up kind of as much as he'll go like that. So he's looking great. And he does feel a little wiry, but not scritchy at all. Still pretty soft tips, but you can kind of feel the thickness of the tips a little bit. But that's just something that's going to last until the tips split on this guy. And hopefully I've been told that once you get to that point, it's a magical place. And so, indeed, some bores, you may have to use them 100, 200 times before it really starts to feel like the brush that you're going to have, you know? And so in that sense with the bores, it almost pays to have one or two bores that you focus on. Because my big old brood of about a dozen bore brushes that I'm raising up all at once, man, they're taking a while. But it is very interesting to compare them as they go. But it's going to take them a while. I might be retiring and still getting those guys. I think at some point I'm going to start booting some of them out of the rotation so that we can pick some and focus. I don't know what I'm going to do, but it's fun. It's fun for now. So there we go. So the Pearl Flexi did a great job with the shave today. The 4 setting was fine. I could feel the blade a little bit more than yesterday, and yesterday it was very minimal feel. It was very smooth and comfortable. So if you like a little blade feel, then you might want to start on the setting of 4 or 5 with this particular razor. But you wouldn't know that it felt so comfortable looking at all the hairs that were mowed down. It just did it very well. Just kind of wiping this on the towel over here. So the Flexi just did tremendously with the all the blades I've put in it so far. I think this is my 3rd shave with this one. And dry him off, lock him down. Why don't we go ahead and loosen him up, turn him over to 2 and see how smooth. Is it going to be too smooth? We'll get that answered tomorrow. Is it going to be, as the aggression ups, as the aggression gets higher, the blade exposure is more, which means that the angle that you're going to be able to cut well is increased. As you reduce and kind of retract that blade and behind the kind of the lee of the safety bar, then that effective angle starts to reduce. And of course that makes it smoother, but it also means you have to be more cognizant of your angles to be able to still get that close shave. And if you have a razor that's very mild, then you may have a super small window. It may take quite an experienced hand to get the best out of that razor. But then when you do, often that's just this magical place because you've got that smoothness, that comfort, and you get that closeness that you want. It just takes a lot of practice sometimes. It can be frustrating, it just depends. All right, well, that's today's shave. This is Sugar Daddy Shaves, and I am really glad you stuck around here. This one, because of all that water adding and a little bit of the talk about the Marco method, ended up to be a little bit on the long side, but that's how it goes sometimes. I sure hope that there's been something in this video to help you guys out. Take care now. Good night.